Welcome to a discussion about how caffeine may affect women and men differently. Caffeine is one of the most researched ergogenic aids, yet most of this research involves male participants. That has left many women wondering if they need a completely different protocol or if the same guidelines apply. In this presentation, we will explore what science says about sex differences in caffeine response and why your individual reaction to caffeine is often more important than broad generalizations. By the end, you will understand the key factors that influence caffeine's effects and how to personalize your strategy to get the most out of this popular stimulant. Although caffeine is among the most studied performance enhancers, the majority of participants in these studies are men. This imbalance has raised questions about whether women should follow a different approach or if men and women respond similarly when dosage is adjusted for body weight. On this slide, we set the stage for our exploration by acknowledging the research gap and highlighting the importance of investigating both sex differences and individual variability. We'll delve into the evidence on how caffeine affects endurance, strength, power, and other aspects of performance in both sexes, keeping an eye on factors such as dosing, metabolism, and hormonal influences. There are plenty of myths about caffeine and gender. Some athletes believe caffeine only benefits men, while others think women need significantly smaller amounts. The truth is more nuanced. Caffeine works for both sexes, but the optimal dose varies greatly from person to person. Individual factors like body weight, genetics, habitual caffeine intake, and sensitivity play a larger role than sex alone. In the upcoming sections, we will break down why body weight-based dosing is a good starting point and how you can adjust your caffeine intake based on your own response rather than general assumptions. Caffeine is a non-selective antagonist of adenosine receptors in the brain, meaning it binds to the A1 and A2A receptors and prevents adenosine from activating them. Adenosine normally slows neural activity and promotes relaxation. When caffeine blocks these receptors, it lifts the brakes on neural activity, making you feel more alert and focused while reducing perceived fatigue. This effect cascades through the central nervous system, increasing the release of neurotransmitters such as dopamine and norepinephrine. Understanding this mechanism helps explain why caffeine enhances both mental and physical performance for many people, regardless of sex. When caffeine is dosed correctly, it consistently improves endurance, strength, endurance, and power output for a wide range of athletes. Studies show that both women and men report greater alertness, sharpened focus, and increased perceived energy when using caffeine before a workout or competition. These benefits allow athletes to push harder and delay fatigue, whether they are running long distances, lifting weights, or performing high-intensity interval training. The key is ensuring that the dose aligns with your body weight and tolerance to maximize the performance boost while minimizing side effects. For most people, the effective range for caffeine falls between 3 and 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, with a minimum of about 2 milligrams per kilogram to feel a performance effect. Doses above 6 milligrams per kilogram tend not to provide additional benefits and are more likely to increase side effects. To illustrate, a person weighing 60 kilograms might start with 180 milligrams of caffeine and consider up to 360 milligrams depending on tolerance. Someone weighing 80 kilograms could range from 240 to 480 milligrams, while a person of 100 kilograms may look at 300 to 600 milligrams. Using body weight to set your dose helps normalize intake across sexes and accounts for individual size differences. Multiple studies comparing women and men have reported similar ergogenic benefits when caffeine is dosed according to body weight. Improvements in endurance, strength endurance, and power output occur in both sexes, suggesting that the underlying mechanisms are comparable. While subtle differences sometimes emerge in specific tasks or muscle groups, the overarching message is clear. Caffeine can enhance performance for women and men alike. This reinforces the importance of focusing on factors such as dose, timing, and personal sensitivity, rather than assuming inherent sex-based differences. Time trial studies in cycling and running indicate that the magnitude of performance improvement after caffeine ingestion is similar between women and men. Interestingly, women often exhibit higher plasma caffeine concentrations because they may metabolize it more slowly, yet they achieve similar endurance gains compared with men. These findings suggest that as long as the dose is scaled to body weight, women can expect comparable benefits in aerobic endurance activities. This underscores that differences in metabolism do not necessarily translate into differences in effectiveness, provided dosing and timing are appropriate. The evidence for caffeine's impact on anaerobic performance and power shows more variability. Some data hint that men might experience greater gains in sprint power, agility, and total weight lifted after caffeine consumption. These differences are not solely due to sex, however. They may result from factors such as greater baseline muscle mass, higher testosterone levels, or differences in central nervous system activation. Body weight and training status also play roles. Women can still see improvements in explosive tasks, but the magnitude may differ. Therefore, it is essential to test caffeine in your own training to determine how it affects your power output and sprint performance. Specific studies on resistance-trained women show that caffeine doses of 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram can improve 1 repetition maximum in the bench press and increase the time muscles spend under tension during a lift. However, these studies also note minimal effect on the number of repetitions completed or on average power. Researchers speculate that these smaller effects on strength endurance may relate to the greater proportion of slow-twitch muscle fibers in women and the high variability in individual responses. So the takeaway is that caffeine can aid maximal strength in women, but it may not always translate into more repetitions or higher average power. Another trial looked at how men and women responded to a dose of 5 milligrams per kilogram. In this study, women saw about a 10.7% improvement in bench press 1 repetition maximum, whereas men improved by roughly 5.9%. However, total weight lifted throughout the session increased only in men. There were no significant differences in squat strength between sexes. These results indicate that muscle group and fiber distribution can influence how caffeine affects strength endurance. While women may gain more in maximal upper body strength, men may translate that strength more effectively into higher training volume. One major challenge in understanding sex differences is the underrepresentation of women in caffeine research. Women comprise only about 13 to 16% of participants in many studies. This small sample limits our confidence in sex-specific conclusions. Additionally, important variables such as menstrual cycle phase, oral contraceptive use, and hormonal fluctuations are rarely controlled or reported. Without considering these factors, it is difficult to isolate true sex differences from hormonal influences or simply natural variability. More balanced studies are needed to draw robust conclusions about how women and men compare in their responses to caffeine. Caffeine metabolism can vary markedly between individuals and sexes. One notable difference is the effect of oral contraceptives on caffeine clearance. Women who use these medications tend to metabolize caffeine more slowly, extending its half-life to roughly 10.7 hours. In contrast, women who are not on contraceptives and men generally show a half-life closer to 5 or 6 hours. These kinetics influence how long caffeine remains active in the body, which in turn affects side effect sensitivity and timing strategies. If caffeine clears more slowly, you may need a smaller dose or longer lead time before bedtime to avoid sleep disruption. Hormonal fluctuations throughout the menstrual cycle can alter caffeine metabolism and cardiovascular responses. Variations in estrogen and progesterone might slow or speed caffeine clearance and change how blood pressure responds. Current evidence on how these hormonal shifts affect caffeine's ergogenic effects is inconclusive. Because of this uncertainty, athletes are encouraged to monitor their own reactions to caffeine across different phases of the cycle. Keeping a log of intake, performance, and side effects can help you adjust your dose or timing as your hormonal profile changes. Some evidence suggests that women may be more susceptible to caffeine-related jitters, anxiety, and sleep disturbances. This is partly due to slower clearance from the body, which leads to higher circulating levels of caffeine for a longer period, and partly due to lower average body weight. To minimize adverse effects, avoid high doses at or above 5 milligrams per kilogram, and be cautious with late-day consumption. The half-life of caffeine can range from 2.5 to 10 hours depending on individual factors, so residual stimulation could still be present at bedtime. Protecting your sleep is essential for recovery and overall health. A practical approach to caffeine intake is to start with a small amount, around 1 to 2 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, and assess how you feel. If that dose is well tolerated and you desire more benefit, you can gradually progress to between 3 and 6 milligrams per kilogram. Body weight-based dosing normalizes caffeine intake across sexes and avoids the misconception that one sex inherently needs more. Always resist the temptation to assume that more is better. Pay attention to your tolerance, how it affects your sleep, and how it aligns with your training goals. As with any supplement, test caffeine during training, rather than for the first time on a race or competition day. Track your performance metrics and note any side effects such as jitters, gastrointestinal discomfort, or trouble sleeping. During high-volume training blocks, consider using lower caffeine doses to avoid compounding fatigue and stress. Avoid late-day caffeine to protect your sleep. Morning or midday intake works best for most athletes. Adjust your protocol as needed based on how you feel and the demands of your schedule. Sex is only one variable in the complex equation that determines your response to caffeine. Genetics, habitual intake, quality of sleep, baseline fatigue, and even psychological state can have greater influence on your reaction. For instance, genetic differences in enzymes that metabolize caffeine can make some people fast metabolizers and others slow metabolizers. The amount of caffeine you usually consume also shapes your tolerance. A good practice is to experiment and pay attention to your own responses rather than rely solely on broad guidelines or sex-based assumptions. This summary slide contrasts women and men across several dimensions. In research participation, women represent roughly 13 to 16% of subjects, whereas men make up the majority. In metabolism, women without contraceptives and men typically have a half-life around 5 to 6 hours, while women using oral contraceptives may experience a half-life closer to 10 hours. Aerobic performance improvements after caffeine ingestion are similar for both sexes. In anaerobic performance, the evidence is mixed. Men may see slightly greater gains in sprint and power tasks, but this could be tied to muscle mass and neuromuscular factors rather than sex alone. Side effect sensitivity tends to be higher in women, partly due to lower body weight and slower clearance. Despite these differences, body weight-based dosing is applicable for everyone, and individual variability matters most. Several myths circulate about caffeine use across sexes. One myth is that women cannot benefit from caffeine while men need more. The fact is that both sexes benefit when doses are scaled by body weight. Another myth is that women must always take lower doses. In reality, lower body weight might warrant a lower absolute amount, but using milligrams per kilogram equalizes the intake across sexes. The real determinant of your optimal dose is your individual tolerance and response. Understanding these facts helps you avoid basing your supplementation on unfounded assumptions. Caffeine is safe for most healthy adults when used responsibly, but there are important exceptions. People with anxiety disorders, high blood pressure, heart rhythm problems, pregnancy, or sensitivity to stimulants should consult a healthcare professional before using caffeine supplements. Avoid stacking multiple high caffeine products such as energy drinks, pre-workout powders, and large cups of coffee to prevent excessive intake. Be aware that caffeine can also be present in medications, chocolate, and other sources. Moderating your total intake protects you from unwanted side effects and helps maintain the efficacy of your supplement strategy. Certain individuals may need to modify their caffeine dosing or timing. Women taking oral contraceptives or in the later stages of pregnancy often clear caffeine more slowly, so they may benefit from lower doses or longer intervals before bedtime. Athletes with low body weight, heightened anxiety sensitivity, or sleep issues should start at the lower end of the dosing range and avoid late-day consumption. Tailoring your protocol to your physiological status and lifestyle ensures you reap the benefits of caffeine while minimizing downsides. The key takeaway for everyone is to dose caffeine by body weight and start low at about 1 to 2 milligrams per kilogram. If you find that this amount produces the desired effect without side effects, you can progress to 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram. Monitor your performance, jitter levels, gastrointestinal comfort, and sleep quality. Adjust your dose or timing rather than assume that your sex requires a specific protocol. Individual experimentation will provide the most reliable insights into how you respond. Caffeine is a proven performance enhancer for both women and men when it is dosed appropriately. While there are some sex differences in metabolism, side effect sensitivity, and possibly certain performance tasks, these differences are generally smaller than the variability observed between individuals. Your response to caffeine depends on a combination of genetics, body weight, hormonal factors, and tolerance. Rather than chasing the largest possible stimulant effect, use caffeine strategically to support your training goals and overall well-being. Thoughtful use, grounded in personal testing, will yield the best results. To close, remember that caffeine works for women and men alike. Dose it according to your body weight, starting at 1 to 2 milligrams per kilogram and increasing only if necessary. Test your response during training sessions and adjust your protocol based on how you perform and feel. Above all, protect your sleep by avoiding late-day consumption and be mindful of other caffeine sources. Personalizing your caffeine intake will help you maximize benefits while minimizing drawbacks.